My mom played a clip of me talking in my sleep about a boy I liked, then made me explain my impure thoughts to an empty chair at a family meeting. When I asked her why she was doing this, she smiled and said, "Because secrets make sinners, and I'm saving your soul." I just stared at her. That was a year ago. Yesterday, she tried to swallow a USB drive in front of a courtroom full of strangers. What's the worst way someone invaded your privacy? My mother installed recording devices in every room of our house because she believed that unmonitored conversations were how children became criminals, and she'd play back our private moments at mandatory family meetings where we had to explain every word. Mom had always been paranoid about what we said when she wasn't around. She started by demanding detailed summaries of every conversation we had at school, making us reenact discussions with friends while she took notes. She'd quiz us separately to see if our stories matched. When my older brother got caught lying about a conversation with his girlfriend, Mom lectured us for 3 hours about how secrets destroyed families. She genuinely believed that every crime started with one unmonitored conversation. When I was 14, Mom announced she'd found the solution. She showed us the tiny microphones that could pick up whispers from across a room. She made it sound reasonable at first, saying it would help us communicate better and resolve conflicts. But then she explained the full system. Every room would be monitored constantly, all audio saved to her computer. Every Sunday after church, we'd have family meetings where she'd play concerning conversations and analyze them together. Within a week, our house became a surveillance state. Mom would sit at her computer for hours with headphones, listening to recordings and taking notes. At our first family meeting, she played a recording of me venting to my sister about a teacher. "Let's discuss why Megan feels comfortable using such violent language," she said, replaying the part where I said I wanted to strangle my teacher. She made me stand up and apologize to an empty chair representing my teacher while my siblings watched. The recordings destroyed any trust between us. My sister stopped talking to me after Mom played a conversation where I'd called her annoying. My brother moved into the garage thinking it might not be bugged, but Mom had put devices there too. We learned to communicate in writing, passing notes that we'd immediately flush, but Mom noticed the silence and added more rules. We had to have at least 10 minutes of conversation per room per day, or she'd assume we were hiding something. I started losing my mind from the constant surveillance. I'd lie in bed at night, afraid to even breathe too loud because Mom might analyze my breathing patterns. When I talked in my sleep about a boy I liked, Mom played it at our family meeting and made me explain my impure, unconscious thoughts. I developed a stutter from the pressure of knowing every word was recorded. Mom said the stutter was proof the system was working. One night, I found her recording device in my room and destroyed it with a hammer. Mom's response was swift. She installed new devices hidden inside light fixtures and vents where we couldn't reach them. She added cameras to catch us destroying equipment. Then she started the punishment recordings. If we broke a rule, she'd lock us in our rooms and play audio of our worst moments on repeat. I had to listen to myself crying for 10 hours straight. The sound of my own misery became torture. So then I tried staying silent, communicating only in nods and gestures. But Mom hired a speech therapist to force me to talk, saying my silence was self-harm. When I still wouldn't speak, she threatened to have me institutionalized for selective mutism. I had no choice but to perform conversations, talking about nothing just to fill her recording quota. My brother snapped during a family meeting where Mom was playing a recording of him crying after a breakup. He grabbed her laptop and smashed it against the wall. Mom called the police, saying he'd assaulted her. When officers arrived, she played edited recordings that made it sound like he'd been planning violence for weeks. They arrested him while Mom sobbed about her dangerous son. After that, Mom started live streaming our family meetings to her church group. She'd play our most humiliating recordings to strangers who'd pray for our souls. She hired someone to transcribe thousands of hours of audio, creating searchable databases of every word we'd said. We weren't her children anymore. We were subjects in her surveillance experiment. Child services showed up after someone from Mom's church reported the live streams. When the social worker asked to speak with us privately, Mom said that was impossible. All conversations had to be recorded. The social worker asked to hear recent recordings, and Mom proudly played clips she thought showed good parenting. Instead, they heard hours of children begging for privacy, crying about surveillance, developing anxiety disorders. They removed us that day, but Mom had prepared for this. As we packed our things, she revealed her final recording. She'd been wearing a wire during every interaction with social services, every court hearing. "I have 50 hours of audio," she said, smiling. "Conversations where you all lie about me, where you admit to things that could get you in serious trouble." She held up a USB drive. "This goes to judges, police, your new foster families, unless you come home voluntarily." The social worker reached for it, but Mom stepped back. "I've already uploaded copies everywhere," she said. "One click and everyone hears what these children really are." My sister started crying. My brother looked defeated. The social worker was calling for backup, and Mom stood there, finally holding all the power, with years of our lives recorded and ready to weaponize. "So," she said, her finger hovering over her phone, "are you coming home, or should I start sending files?" The social worker stepped between us and Mom, her voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, I need you to put the phone down. These children are under state protection now." Mom's smile widened. She pressed a button on her phone, and immediately my stomach dropped. The social worker's phone buzzed, then another buzz from her colleague's pocket. Mom had sent something to everyone. "Check your emails," Mom said calmly. "I've included transcripts with timestamps. Everything these children have said about wanting to hurt themselves, hurt others, their substance experimentation discussions, their plans to run away, it's all there." My hands started shaking. I knew exactly which conversations she meant. The time I'd told my brother I wanted to disappear. The joke my sister made about stealing Mom's sleeping pills. Every dark thought we'd shared in what we thought were private moments. The social worker glanced at her phone, then back at Mom. "Ma'am, recordings obtained through illegal surveillance aren't admissible as evidence, and threatening children with them is criminal." Mom laughed, not her fake church laugh, but the real one that made my skin crawl. "I'm their mother. Recording my own children in my own home isn't illegal. I have every right to monitor them for their safety." She pulled out a folder from her purse, spreading papers across the coffee table. Legal documents, custody agreements, printed emails from lawyers. She'd been preparing for this moment for years. "I've consulted with 3 different attorneys," she continued. "In this state, parents can record their minor children. Every device was registered, every recording legally obtained. You want to remove them? Fine. But every foster family, every group home, every judge will hear these recordings. They'll know exactly what kind of children they're dealing with." My brother stepped forward, fists clenched. The social worker grabbed his arm, holding him back. Mom noticed and and smiled wider. See? Violence. Just like in recording 847 from last March. Should I play that one? Where he describes in detail what he'd like to do to me? My sister was sobbing harder now, covering her ears. I wanted to comfort her but couldn't move. My legs felt frozen to the spot. The social worker's colleague was making phone calls, speaking in hushed tones about emergency placements and legal consultation. More people kept arriving. 2 more social workers, a supervisor, someone from the legal department. Our living room filled with strangers while Mom sat calmly in her chair, phone in hand like a weapon. The recordings are organized by date and topic, Mom explained to the growing audience. I have folders for each child. Megan's self-harm discussions, Nathan's anger issues, Tara's eating disorder development. Would you like me to start with the most recent ones or go chronologically? Nathan, Tara. She was using our full names now, the ones she only used when we were in serious trouble. My stutter got worse just hearing them. The legal department representative, a woman in a gray suit, stepped forward. Mrs. Davidson, I understand you believe you're protecting your children, but threatening them with these recordings constitutes emotional abuse. We can have you arrested right now. Mom tilted her head. Arrest me? While my children are having mental health crises? Look at these transcripts. They need help, not abandonment. I'm the only one who truly understands their issues because I've heard every word, every cry for help. She pulled out another stack of papers. These are my notes from 5 years of recordings. Behavior patterns, warning signs, intervention strategies. No foster family will have this level of insight. You're condemning them to fail without their mother's documentation. The supervisor whispered something to the legal representative. They moved to the corner, discussing in low voices. Mom watched them like a cat watching mice. I've also sent copies to Pastor Williams, Principal Henderson, and Dr. Lopez at the psychiatric facility, Mom added casually. They're expecting my children for evaluation if you remove them from my care. The recordings prove they need immediate intervention. My brother broke free from the social worker's grip and lunged for Mom's phone. The way this mother uses safety and protection to justify her surveillance makes me wonder what her own childhood was like. Something must have broken her ability to understand normal family trust. She pulled it back just in time, and he crashed into the coffee table instead. Papers scattered everywhere. Mom immediately started narrating into her phone. Tuesday, 4:47 p.m. Nathan attempted to assault me and steal my property. Multiple witnesses present. This follows pattern established in recordings 592 through 611. The social workers restrained Nathan while he struggled and shouted. Mom kept recording, documenting every word he said. She was building her case in real time. I want all recording devices removed from this home immediately, the supervisor finally announced. This is a crime scene now. Mom stood up slowly. Of course, but I should mention that removing the devices won't delete the cloud backups. 5 years of audio, all safely stored on servers in 3 different states. My attorney has the access codes. She walked to her computer, typing something quickly. I'm sending the master file list to everyone now. 3,000 hours of audio. Every conversation, every whisper, every nightmare. These children's entire lives, documented and indexed. The email notification sounds filled the room as everyone's phones buzzed simultaneously. Mom had weaponized our childhood, turned our growth and pain into ammunition. We need to leave now, the supervisor decided. Children, gather your essential belongings. We have emergency placements ready. As we moved toward our rooms, Mom called out one last time. Remember, everything you say from now on goes on record too. Foster families have to document incidents. Group homes record therapy sessions. The court will analyze every word. The surveillance never really ends, does it? I grabbed my backpack with shaking hands, shoving in random clothes. In my desk drawer, I found the notebook where we'd written messages to each other, the only communication Mom couldn't record. I flipped through pages of our silent conversations, our desperate attempts to stay human under her surveillance. My sister appeared in my doorway, eyes red and puffy. She held up her own notebook, and I saw she'd been thinking the same thing. We'd need these where we were going. They were proof that we'd fought back, that we'd found ways to exist despite the recordings. Down the hall, Nathan was throwing things into a garbage bag, muttering under his breath. I knew Mom was probably recording the sounds, adding them to her vast archive of our lives. The social worker assigned to me, a younger woman with kind eyes, helped me zip my backpack. It's going to be okay, she whispered. We've dealt with situations like this before, but I knew she was wrong. They'd never dealt with someone like Mom, someone who'd turned love into surveillance and parenting into espionage, someone who had 5 years of our lives ready to weaponize at any moment. As we walked back to the living room, Mom was showing the legal representative something on her laptop. Charts, graphs, analytics of our conversation patterns. She'd turned us into data, into subjects in her twisted experiment. Before you take them, Mom announced, you should know about the sewer slide attempts. All documented in the recordings. Megan's was last summer. Tara's was during Christmas break. Nathan has made threats monthly since age 15. Will their foster families be equipped to handle this? None of it was true. But how could we prove that? She had recordings of every joke, every dark moment, every expression of normal teenage frustration. Taken out of context, played selectively, they could paint any picture she wanted. The supervisor's face had gone pale. We'll need to place them in therapeutic foster homes then, possibly separate ones for safety. No, Tara cried out. We need to stay together. Mom clicked her tongue. Recording 1263 suggests Tara has unhealthy codependency with her siblings. Separation might be therapeutic. I watched my family falling apart in real time, destroyed by Mom's twisted interpretation of our own words. Every plea for help would be used against us. Every moment of weakness weaponized. The social workers started moving us toward the door. Mom followed, still recording on her phone, still narrating our destruction. Tuesday, 5:15 p.m. Children leaving with state custody. Megan showing signs of dissociation. Tara exhibiting anxiety symptoms. Nathan displaying aggressive body language. Recommend immediate psychiatric evaluation for all 3. As we reached the front door, she played one final recording. My voice, younger and happier, telling her I loved her after she'd tucked me in, before the surveillance started, before she'd turned our home into a prison. I have thousands of these too, she said softly. Happy moments, loving conversations, proof that I was a good mother before you all turned against me. The court will hear both sides. The door closed behind us, but I could still see her through the window. She was already back at her computer, headphones on, listening to our lives and taking notes. The car ride to the emergency placement felt like another recording session. I sat between Tara and Nathan in the back seat, our social workers driving us to separate locations. Tara gripped my hand so tight her nails dug into my palm. Nathan stared out the window, jaw clenched, knuckles white against his knees. The social worker explained we'd stay in temporary homes for 72 hours while they arranged proper placements. Tara would go to a family specializing in younger children, Nathan to a group home for teens with behavioral issues, me to an emergency foster mother who lived alone. We pulled up to Tara's placement first, a yellow house with a tire swing in the yard. The foster mother came out smiling, but Tara wouldn't let go of my hand. The social workers had to physically separate us. Tara screamed my name as they carried her inside. The sound reminded me of Mom's punishment recordings. Nathan's group home looked like a converted office building. Gray walls, security cameras, buzzers on every door. He grabbed my shoulder before getting out, pressing something into my hand, a folded piece of paper. I shoved it in my pocket before the social workers noticed. My placement was last, a small apartment above a bakery. The foster mother, Mrs. Van, had kind eyes but kept glancing at her phone. I knew Mom's emails had reached her. She'd already heard the recordings, already formed opinions about what kind of child I was. Mrs. Van showed me to a bedroom that smelled like vanilla and old books. She explained the house rules while I unpacked. No locked doors, no electronics after 9. Check-ins every hour. It felt like trading one surveillance system for another. That night, I unfolded Nathan's note. He'd drawn a map of Mom's computer system, passwords he'd figured out, locations of backup drives. At the bottom, he'd written instructions for accessing the cloud storage. He'd been planning this for months. I memorized every detail, then flushed the paper down the toilet, just like we'd done at home. Mrs. Van knocked on the bathroom door, asking if I was okay. The surveillance never stopped. The next morning brought our first family court hearing. They transported us separately, but I saw Tara in the hallway. Her eyes were puffy from crying. Nathan had a bruise on his cheek. He shook his head when I tried to ask about it. Mom arrived with 3 lawyers. She wore her church dress and carried a briefcase full of transcripts. She'd printed thousands of pages, highlighting the worst moments in yellow. The stack of papers towered over the judge's desk. The judge, an older woman with gray hair, listened as Mom's lawyers presented their case. They played recordings on a laptop, our voices filling the courtroom. Tara begging for privacy, Nathan expressing anger about the surveillance, me talking about wanting to disappear. Mom sat there taking notes, occasionally whispering to her lawyers. She'd catch my eye and smile, that same smile from when she'd first shown us the recording devices. Like this was all for our own good. Our court-appointed lawyer tried to object to the recordings, but Mom's team had done their research. In our state, parents could record their minor children. The surveillance was legal. The emotional torture was just parenting. The judge ordered a full investigation. Social workers would interview us separately. Psychological evaluations would be conducted. Mom would maintain her parental rights during the process. She could still send recordings to anyone she wanted. After court, they took us back to our placements. I spent the afternoon with Mrs. Van, who kept asking careful questions about my home life. I knew she was documenting everything for her reports. Everyone was always documenting. That evening, Mrs. Van let me use her computer for homework. I waited until she was in the kitchen, then quickly accessed Nathan's cloud storage information. My hands shook as I logged in. Thousands of audio files appeared on screen, organized by date and subject. I found folders labeled with our names. Inside mine were subfolders: Megan's lies, Megan's violent thoughts, Megan's mental health issues. Each contained hundreds of recordings taken out of context, but Nathan had created his own folders too. Mom's admissions, Mom's contradictions, evidence of abuse. He'd been collecting counter evidence for months, recording her recording us. I downloaded everything to a USB drive Mrs. Van had left on the desk. My heart pounded as the files transferred. This was our only chance to fight back with Mom's own weapons. Mrs. Van returned just as I finished. I quickly closed the windows and pretended to work on homework. She studied my face but didn't say anything. Maybe she understood more than she let on. The next day brought individual interviews with social workers. They asked about the recordings, about our home life, about Mom's surveillance system. Mom's chess game reveals itself brilliantly. She turned childhood into evidence and motherhood into a court case, complete with timestamps and exhibit numbers that would make any lawyer jealous of her dedication. I tried to explain how the constant monitoring had destroyed us, but words felt inadequate. How could they understand what it felt like to have every breath analyzed? The social worker took notes on a laptop. The clicking keys reminded me of Mom typing up her transcripts. I wondered if this interview would become another file in someone's system, another recording to be played back and analyzed. Tara's interview was after mine. I passed her in the hallway, and she grabbed my arm. Her foster family had been playing Mom's recordings, she whispered. They wanted to understand her issues. She'd heard herself crying on repeat, just like Mom's punishment sessions. Nathan's interview went worse. He'd refused to speak at first, and they'd marked him as uncooperative. The group home had already filed 3 incident reports about his aggressive behavior. Mom's narrative was becoming reality. That afternoon brought our psychological evaluations. Different offices, different doctors, but the same questions. They'd all received Mom's recordings and transcripts. The doctor evaluating me kept referring to specific conversations, asking me to explain context Mom had deliberately removed. I tried to tell him about the surveillance system, about the mandatory family meetings, about the punishment recordings. He nodded and typed notes, occasionally glancing at his phone. I wondered if Mom was sending him new files in real time. The evaluation lasted 3 hours. By the end, I felt like Mom was in the room with us, her presence embedded in every recording they'd reviewed. Even here, she controlled the narrative. Back at Mrs. Van's apartment, I found a package on my bed. No return address, but I recognized Mom's handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a note. In case you forgot what you really are. I plugged it into Mrs. Van's computer when she wasn't looking. The drive contained a single folder, Megan's greatest hits. 20 hours of my worst moments, edited together into a highlight reel of pain. Mom had weaponized my entire adolescence, but she'd made a mistake. The metadata on the files showed when they'd been edited, how clips had been cut and rearranged, evidence of her manipulation. I saved everything to my hidden drive. The next morning brought news that shattered our remaining hope. The judge had granted Mom supervised visitation rights. We'd have to see her twice a week at the Family Services Center. She could bring her recordings to show us therapeutic progress. Our first visitation was that afternoon. They brought us to a sterile room with cameras in every corner. Mom was already there, laptop open, recordings ready. She'd prepared a presentation about our behavioral patterns. She played clips showing how our issues had developed over time. Tara's anxiety increasing, Nathan's anger escalating, my depression worsening, all carefully edited to support her narrative. We sat in silence as our voices filled the room. The social worker supervising the visit took notes, buying into Mom's performance. She was winning, even separated from us. After the visit, it? Nathan pulled me aside in the parking lot. He'd been documenting everything at the group home, he said, recording conversations with staff who'd received Mom's emails, building evidence of how her recordings poisoned everyone against us. Tara had been doing the same at her placement. Her foster parents had started treating her like a mental patient after reviewing Mom's files. She'd recorded them discussing her eating disorder that didn't exist. We were learning to fight surveillance with surveillance. Mom had taught us well. That night, I organized all our evidence on the USB drive. Nathan's recordings of Mom admitting to the punishment sessions. Tara's documentation of foster families influenced by Mom's emails. My collection of edited metadata proving manipulation. Mrs. Van caught me on her computer at 2 a.m. Instead of getting angry, she sat down beside me. She asked to see what I was working on. I hesitated, then showed her everything. Her face changed as she reviewed the files. She'd been a foster mother for 20 years, she said. She'd never seen anything like this. Mom had turned parenting into psychological warfare. Mrs. Van helped me organize the evidence properly. She knew which files would matter in court, which recordings would prove Mom's manipulation. She'd been documenting things too, she admitted. The fear in my eyes when her phone buzzed. The way I flinched at recording sounds. The next family meeting came with new rules. Mom could only play recordings relevant to our treatment plans, but she'd prepared hundreds of clips for each topic. Our voices became weapons against us again. During the meeting, she announced she'd hired a family therapist who specialized in troubled children. Dr. Harrison had reviewed all her recordings and agreed we needed intensive intervention. She'd already scheduled appointments. The social worker seemed impressed by Mom's proactive approach. She was playing the concerned mother perfectly, using our pain as evidence of her dedication. Every recording proved how much she cared. After the meeting, Tara broke down completely. She couldn't handle hearing herself cry anymore. Nathan punched a wall, adding another incident report to his file. I just felt numb, like Mom had finally broken something inside me. But Mrs. Van had an idea. She knew a lawyer who specialized in custody cases involving emotional abuse, someone who understood how surveillance could be used as torture. She made the call that night. The lawyer, Ms. Rodriguez, met with us the next day. She'd seen cases like ours before, she said. Parents who documented everything but understood nothing. She could help, but we'd need to be strategic. First, we needed our own expert, a psychologist who could review Mom's recordings and identify the manipulation, someone who could explain how constant surveillance traumatized children. Ms. Rodriguez knew exactly who to call. Dr. Kim specialized in technology-related abuse. She'd written papers on surveillance and domestic violence cases. When she heard about Mom's system, she cleared her schedule immediately. Our first session with Dr. Kim felt different from the court-ordered evaluation. She asked about the surveillance, but also about life before the recordings. She wanted to understand who we were beyond Mom's edited versions. She reviewed Mom's recordings with fresh eyes, identifying patterns we'd lived but couldn't articulate. The way Mom would replay conversations until we broke, how she'd edit clips to remove context, the psychological torture hidden in plain sight. Dr. Kim documented everything in a report that contradicted Mom's narrative. We weren't troubled children who needed surveillance. We were abuse survivors who'd been tortured with our own voices. Ms. Rodriguez filed the report with the court, along with our counter evidence, Nathan's recordings of Mom, Tara's documentation of foster family bias, my proof of edited files. The truth was finally speaking louder than Mom's lies. Mom's response was swift and vicious. She sent new recordings to everyone involved in our case. Conversations taken from years ago, twisted into fresh weapons. She hired 2 more lawyers and another expert witness. The battle escalated beyond anything we'd imagined. Mom started a blog about parenting troubled children, posting edited recordings as examples. She contacted local news stations, trying to share her story of false accusations, but she'd overplayed her hand. The blog posts showed her obsession clearly. The recordings she posted publicly revealed the extent of her surveillance. She was proving our case for us. Dr. Kim testified at our next hearing, explaining how Mom's surveillance system constituted emotional abuse. She played Mom's own recordings, pointing out the manipulation techniques. The judge's expression changed as she listened. Mom's lawyers tried to discredit Dr. Kim, but the evidence was overwhelming. Thousands of hours of recordings, years of documented torture, children begging for privacy while their mother took notes. The judge ordered Mom to undergo her own psychological evaluation. She had to surrender all recording equipment and provide full access to her files. The tables were finally turning. Mom's evaluation revealed what we'd always known: severe anxiety disorder, paranoid personality traits, an obsessive need for control manifesting as surveillance. She needed help, not access to children. But Mom wasn't finished. She hired a private investigator to follow us to our placements. She created fake social media accounts to contact our foster families. She sent anonymous packages with USB drives full of recordings. Each desperate move proved our case further. Ms. Rodriguez documented everything, building an airtight argument for terminating Mom's parental rights. The woman who'd recorded everything was creating evidence of her own instability. Our foster families started working together, sharing information about Mom's harassment. Mrs. Van organized meetings with Tara and Nathan's placements. They formed a united front against Mom's manipulation. Tara's foster parents apologized for believing Mom's recordings. They'd realized the eating disorder only existed in edited clips. Nathan's group home stopped filing incident reports based on Mom's emails. People were finally seeing through her lies. Dr. Kim continued our therapy, helping us process years of surveillance trauma. We learned to speak without fearing recording devices, to have conversations without analyzing every word, to exist without performing for invisible microphones. Mom's final court hearing approached like a storm. She'd gathered 50 character witnesses from her church. She'd prepared a presentation with thousands of recordings. She'd hired a team of 5 lawyers. But we had something more powerful than her surveillance archive. The way Dr. Kim spotted patterns in those recordings that the family couldn't even put into words makes me wonder how many layers of manipulation were hidden in plain sight. How did the mother know exactly which conversations to replay until they broke? We had the truth, documented and verified. We had experts who understood our trauma. We had foster families who'd seen Mom's manipulation firsthand. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all those recordings, all those stolen moments. Mom had documented our entire lives, but she'd never actually heard us. Mrs. Van made tea and sat with me until dawn. She shared her own story of escaping an abusive parent, how she'd become a foster mother to help children like us, how proud she was of our courage. Tara called from her placement, voice steady for the first time in months. She was ready to face Mom in court. Nathan texted that he'd been accepted into a different group home, one that didn't have Mom's recordings. We were rebuilding our lives outside Mom's surveillance state, learning to trust our own voices again. Tomorrow would determine if we could make that freedom permanent. The courthouse looked the same as always, but everything felt different. We walked in together, supported by foster families who'd become our advocates. Ms. Rodriguez and Dr. Kim flanked us like guardians. Mom was already there with her entourage. She'd set up displays of transcripts, prepared laptops full of recordings. She looked smaller somehow, surrounded by evidence of her obsession. As we took our seats, I realized something had changed. Her recordings no longer scared me. They were just sounds now, echoes of pain she'd caused. We'd survived her surveillance. We'd found our voices despite her theft of them. The hearing would last all day. Mom would play her recordings. We'd present our evidence. The judge would decide our fate. But regardless of the outcome, we'd already won something back. We'd reclaimed our truth from Mom's archive of lies. The judge entered the courtroom at exactly 9 o'clock. Mom immediately stood up, gesturing toward her display of evidence. The judge raised her hand, stopping Mom mid-motion. She announced new procedures for this hearing. No recordings would be played without prior approval. All evidence would be reviewed in chambers first. Mom's face twitched. She shuffled through her papers, reorganizing her presentation. Her lawyers huddled around her, whispering frantically. They hadn't prepared for restrictions. The judge called Mom to testify first. Mom walked to the stand carrying a thick binder. She began explaining her surveillance system, how it protected us from becoming criminals. The judge interrupted repeatedly, asking for specific examples. Mom fumbled through her notes, searching for the right recordings. Without her audio arsenal playing constantly, Mom's arguments sounded hollow. She described conversations out of context, trying to paint us as disturbed children. But without the actual recordings to manipulate emotions, her words fell flat. Dr. Kim testified next. She presented her analysis methodically, showing how Mom had edited recordings to create false narratives. She demonstrated with specific examples, playing original files alongside Mom's edited versions. The manipulation became undeniable. Mom started fidgeting in her seat. She passed notes to her lawyers constantly. When Dr. Kim explained how surveillance trauma affected developing minds, Mom shook her head violently. Her lawyers had to calm her down. Ms. Rodriguez presented our evidence. Nathan's recordings of Mom admitting to punishment sessions, documentation of her harassment campaign, proof of edited files. The judge examined each piece carefully, asking pointed questions. During the lunch break, Mom cornered us in the hallway. The bailiff immediately intervened, reminding her about the no-contact order. Mom backed away but kept staring at us, mouthing words we couldn't understand. Her desperation was showing. The afternoon session brought testimony from our foster families. Mrs. Van described my fear of phones buzzing, my flinching at recording sounds. Tara's foster parents explained how Mom's emails had initially biased them. Nathan's group home director detailed the false incident reports based on Mom's recordings. Mom's character witnesses came next, but under cross-examination, they admitted they'd only heard edited recordings. They'd never actually witnessed our behavior. One church member confessed she'd felt uncomfortable with the live-streamed family meetings but hadn't known how to intervene. The judge ordered a recess to review evidence in chambers. We waited in a small room while she examined thousands of hours of recordings. Tara drew pictures to stay calm. Nathan paced endlessly. I stared at the wall, trying not to think about what came next. 3 hours later, court reconvened. The judge's expression was grim. She'd sampled enough recordings to understand the scope of Mom's surveillance. She'd heard our voices begging for privacy, crying under constant monitoring, developing anxiety from the pressure. Mom's final witness was her new expert, a psychologist who'd reviewed her transcripts. But under questioning, he admitted he'd only seen Mom's edited versions. He hadn't heard original recordings. His testimony crumbled when Dr. Akim provided context for the conversations he'd analyzed. The judge announced she'd heard enough testimony. She would review all evidence and issue her decision within 2 weeks. Mom jumped up, demanding to play one more recording. The judge warned her about contempt of court. Mom sat down, shaking. As we left the courthouse, Mom tried following us to the parking lot. Security intercepted her. She stood at the door, watching us leave. Her empire of recordings couldn't save her now. The next 2 weeks crawled by. I stayed with Mrs. Van, trying to focus on school, but concentration was impossible. Every ring of the phone made me jump, thinking it was news about the decision. Tara called every night from her placement. Her foster family had removed all recording devices from their home to help her feel safe. She was starting to speak more freely, though still in whispers. Nathan sent updates through Mrs. Van. His new group home specialized in trauma recovery. They understood surveillance abuse. He was learning to trust again, slowly. Mom escalated her harassment during the waiting period. She created more fake social media accounts. She sent USB drives to my school, Tara's foster family, Nathan's group home. Each package contained new edited recordings, new twisted narratives. Ms. Rodriguez documented everything. Every package, every fake account, every attempt at contact. Mom was building the case against herself with each desperate move. Dr. Akim held emergency sessions with us. The waiting was re-traumatizing us, she explained. We needed strategies to cope. She taught us grounding techniques for when the anxiety overwhelmed us. Mom's church finally intervened. The pastor called Ms. Rodriguez, explaining that Mom had been banned from services. She'd tried to play recordings during prayer meetings. She'd cornered congregation members, demanding they testify for her. Even her supporters were pulling away. 10 days into waiting, Mom was arrested. She'd broken into Tara's foster home while the family was out, planting recording devices. The security system caught her. She was released on bail but ordered to stay away from all of us. The arrest made local news. Not sensational coverage, just a brief mention in the crime report. But Mom's carefully constructed image was crumbling. The devoted mother narrative was falling apart. Finally, the decision day arrived. We sat in the courtroom, surrounded by our support system. Mom entered with only one lawyer now. The others had withdrawn from the case. She looked smaller, older, defeated. The judge's ruling was comprehensive. She found that Mom's surveillance system constituted severe emotional abuse. The recordings, even the happy ones, were obtained through violation of privacy and trust. The constant monitoring had caused documented psychological harm. Mom's parental rights were terminated immediately. Permanent restraining orders were issued. She was ordered to undergo extensive psychological treatment. All recordings had to be destroyed under court supervision, but the judge went further. She ordered Mom to pay for our therapy, acknowledging the long-term damage from surveillance trauma. Mom would have monthly reviews to ensure she wasn't surveilling anyone else. Any Any violation would result in jail time. Mom collapsed in her chair. Her lawyer tried to console her, but she pushed him away. All those recordings, all that control, gone. She'd documented our lives obsessively, but lost us completely. The judge addressed us directly. She acknowledged our courage in speaking out despite the surveillance. She assured us the recordings would be destroyed. Our privacy finally restored. We were free. Time really does fly when you're having this much fun, huh? Thanks for letting me toss in my 2 cents along the way. Catch you on the flip side. Subscribe for more content like this.